Hello, welcome back to the podcast, Gabrielle Dolan. How are you?
I am very excited to be with you, Janine.
I am so excited to have yet another conversation with you. But this time we're talking about your new book, which we're going to delve into, Story Intelligence. There it is. Can't wait, because it's all about bridging that gap between humanity and storytelling and AI, which we know we were talking about off air, the various fears that exist with the way the world is going and AI. Before we jump into it, I also want to congratulate you on your own podcast. Keeping it real with Jack and Raoul.
Jack and
Raoul and
Raoul,
Jack,
yeah.
I can never remember which way it is. How's all that going?
It's Jack and Raoul.
Jack and Raoul, there you go.
We decided age before beauty. That's what I tell her. It's going really well. Like we started January last year, and I really sort of thought, after 10 episodes, what are we going to talk about? But God, it's amazing how much shit comes out of our mouth. And I think we're up to like about 92 episodes. So it comes out every Monday. And look, you know what I love about it? It's like we have fun recording it, but it also sometimes, something will come up and we're like, oh, we should do a podcast on that. So it almost forces you to sort of do a bit of research and get into stuff that you wouldn't normally do. So I like the fact that it keeps us thinking about topical things that are happening that are related to leadership or communication or, business or whatever. And, Jack's a barrel of laughs.
The both of you are. It's definitely a lot of fun. And I really love you just keep it seriously human, right? Seriously human, jargon free, saying many things that many of us don't say, and just absolutely love it. So congratulations. Keep going.
Thank you.
It really is a breath of fresh air. Now we were working this out, you're about to launch your 9th book.
9 books.
You are an award-winning communication strategist. You are obsessed about the power of storytelling. You spend your career working with organizations around the world, and you've spoken on some pretty impressive stages about storytelling. You stood up at Harvard. We've seen photos of you alongside Barack Obama. You know your stuff, but you've been doing this for a while. How many years have you been on the storytelling journey?
Yeah, it's coming up to 21 years now. So, like 21 years ago, I left my corporate career, and it was in my corporate career that I sort of started to realize how powerful storytelling was, and thought, I reckon this is a skill people need to learn. So I can't believe it's 21 years. Like I was in corporate for 20 years, and now I'm been out of corporate longer. So I don't even want to do the maths on that. Like that's scary. It's very scary.
But you've seen over that time, I'm imagining various evolutions of both market appetite for storytelling and individual confidence and desire for storytelling. Before we get into this next evolution with AI, what have you noticed from your work that storytelling brings to business, and why does it actually matter? Why does it matter that we get better at this skill?
Yeah, look, it's 21 years ago. Seriously, it took me about 10 months to get one client. And my first client was my previous manager at National Australia Bank, and I'm sure he was just like giving me, a bit of a leg up. But he was working with a coach, and his coach was telling him about the power of storytelling. So back then, I would have clients bring me in and say, can we call it communication skills or influencing skills? Because if we call it storytelling training, no one will come. And that was very much 20 years ago. Why would we need storytelling? That's not professional. It's not business. And that has been a massive shift. So, over time, the amount of people that were saying we don't need storytelling, what a load of crap, that's not business, has shrunk. And now you're at the point where people are just going, we need storytelling training. We need our leaders to get better at storytelling. People are seeing the power of it. And I think, and that's the evolution, that they're trying it and they're going, well, this gets cut through. This is more effective. I ran a workshop the other day and I was talking about how we just give, information. We just report on stuff. And I said to them, why do you think that's the case? And everyone says it's easy because being a reporter is easy. And in the break, when I'm teaching them and they've got to think of a story, someone came up and said, oh, everyone's feeling a little bit nervous to share a story. And I go, yeah, because that takes a bit of courage. And he said to me, he goes, I guess you've got to choose with your communication. Do you want it easy or do you want it effective? And I went, that's exactly. So stories are effective. That's the bottom line. They work. It's what we remember. It's what we connect with.
And what I've noticed, because I've known you for a long time too, is that it's almost moved out of the boardroom or out of the walls of an organization and become much more everyday for the person that's building their own business as well. So whether it be using storytelling in content, whether it be using storytelling from a stage because you're sharing a story, or even I've noticed, with my own kids around the kitchen table, using storytelling to get a point across around putting in that extra 1% or, taking feedback well. And it's the whole point here is being able to both build your positioning and stand out from the crowd because everyone has unique stories. You cannot mass produce and everyone has the same story. It's that uniqueness and authenticity that's key. And at the same time, what I love about your work is how you create that segue into the learning experience. So we're seeing the demand pick up. Now with that, because as I said, this is your 9th book.
Sorry, I was going to say, when you were talking about that, Jadine, it was like that's almost the evolution of my books as well, where they were all for leaders, just leaders selling. And then my previous book, Magnetic Stories, was about, how, like not internally, but how with customers and whether it's individuals or organizations. And then the latest book is using it for everything. Like, I've got examples of using it in wedding speeches or in eulogies and absolutely with your kids. Like sometimes we do that normally with our kids, but it can be so powerful, like sharing stories with your kids to get the message across. Because it's like coaching and mentoring where you don't want to be telling them because they sort of go, what would you know? But you share a story and they go, yeah, okay, they get it better.
So I've got to ask, why did you decide to write this book? Why did you decide to go again? What is it that compelled you to write another book at this moment in time to again focus on the storytelling? Where did that desire, need, want come from?
Yeah, and look, you used the word compelled there, and I think that's right. Like my previous books, we run a business, you know what it's like, Janine. You got people going, write a book, be known as the expert. And I was like, okay, I'll write a book. And so that's why we're writing a book. And I was writing on storytelling. And I honestly thought my last book came out 4 years ago. So that's been a long time between books for me. But I think it was a long time between books because I thought, there's nothing else I can write about storytelling. Like it's all out there in my previous books. What started to happen, and it probably was only about a year ago, I'd be running workshops and I had people asking me, so will AI replace storytelling? And like that question started to horrify me. And people were asking it so much and I'm going, no, like, of course AI is not going to replace your storytelling. And to me, it was like your stories will be needed more than ever. And then I had other people going, but using AI to help with your stories cheating. And I'm going, no, that's not true either. So I thought I need to write something on this. And I don't know about you, Janine, but sometimes I think I can write a book and it just ends up being an article. It's just like, there's a lot of business books that should remain articles too, by the way. And I just thought, I'm not sure if this is a book or it's just a, 2,000-word article. So I started to write, and the more I wrote, the more I got into it. I had 30,000 words. So, and then I thought, no, I think this is a book. And I spoke to my publisher and they said, yep. And then 50,000 words later, here we are. Or, 100,000 words later, edited down to 50,000 words.
So this book that you've written is called Story Intelligence, The Craft of Authentic Storytelling Made Smarter with AI. And one of the things you talk about is how we can bridge the human voice using AI and how to actually use it without using or compromising, our voices. So I'm curious, tell me more about this book. Tell me more, because to give you some context, I work with a lot of business owners and there is still a lot of fear around AI. I think there's a lot of people think about it as a productivity tool, not necessarily a tool that's going to help them share their stories broader, wider, more context, more impact. So I'm really curious for you as to what's the key message in this book that our listeners are going to resonate with.
Yeah, so the key message, and I guess the whole reason of writing the book, is that we're in a world of distrust. So I follow the Edelman reports that are produced annually, which I know you do as well, and distrust across all government organisations, not-for-profit media is at an all-time low. So we're in a world of distrust. We are also in a world of AI generated content. So not only the deep fake videos that AI does that's adding to this distrust, but the blandness of AI generated content. Good on everyone for embracing ChatGPT, but don't lose your voice in it. So I read a lot of stuff and it's just so obvious it's ChatGPT. And so I truly believe that your unique stories are needed more than ever, and they will get cut through where the blandness won't. So it's needed more than ever. So that was, I guess, the premise of the book. And I talk about the book, about the power of storytelling as well. But then I get really into, as a person, whether, you're running your own business or you're an entrepreneur or you're a CEO, the 4 types of stories that you need, which are parable, public, professional, and personal. And then how you can use AI to help you find those stories, but then refine them. But again, refining them so you don't lose your voice. So when I started writing the book, Janine, I just sort of thought AI could really help with the public and the parable. So that's almost like, searching for a story on teamwork, and you might find a parable or you might find, something about whatever, right? They're not very useful with your professional or personal because they're your experience. So how could AI help with that? By the time I'd finished writing the book, my mindset had completely changed because I was experimenting more and more with AI. And I share this in the book where, I was researching myself. So I'd say you want to find, and this is, your listeners could do this. Say you're trying to find a story on courage, for example, and you're just going, I just can't think of a story. You get into ChatGPT or Claude or whichever one you're using, and it's like, ask me questions to help me uncover a story about courage. And they're going to do what I would do with you, to go, well, tell me a time when you've been really scared of doing something and you've done it anyway. Or tell me, and there's all these prompting questions, which helps you find the story. What really freaked me out a bit though, Janine, was that then said, just give me like bullet points of what happened, which I did. And then it came back with the story, and I was surprised how good it was. Now, it wasn't great, and you do have to edit it, and this is where you got to find your voice, but it was actually pretty good, and you could use that. So it's helping you, it's using it, AI as your creative partner is what I say, to help you find the stories.
Which is the very thing that I know when I, get feedback from our listeners or my clients, it's the things that they struggle with because they're so used to doing the reporter style storytelling combined with a fear of being vulnerable, being honest, sharing a little bit more of themselves. And I find this is a little bit sort of generational too. Like, oh, do people need to hear that? I'm like, as long as you're not, we call it in speaker land, don't we? As long as it's not therapy from the stage, but it's a learning experience. Actually, the benefit of sharing those personal business stories, well, from your perspective, what is the benefit of being brave enough, courageous enough to use your own story versus the things that you can find online that are more mass stories that everybody knows?
Yeah, well, it's I think you just said it. Everyone knows them. I guess so they're not unique. But also, if you're sharing, if you're telling me a parable or a fable or a public, case study about Steve Jobs or whatever, I'm not finding anything about you. But if you're sharing a personal story, as in it happened at work or it didn't happen at work, it happened, and I'm getting to know you a bit better, and that's the power in the story. And I think you're right. A lot of people are still reluctant to show any form of vulnerability. So what I find is sometimes they're sharing stories, but it's almost what I would call the bragger, where they're sort of talking about, this great thing they did and whatever. And again, you could use chat GPT for this, to put that story in it and go, ask me questions about this story that would show me in a more human light or be more vulnerable. And what it's going to come back with is, how did you feel at that time? Did you have any self-doubts? And the point is, then you'll go, oh yeah, I did, right? So this isn't about making stuff up. It's just going, you probably should include the self-doubts in the story, and then it won't feel like you're bragging. But, that's showing a bit of vulnerability that we're still, or some people are still a little bit reluctant to do. But, I know, and I know you would know this too. You write a story on social media and there's vulnerability in it. It just gets so much more engagement than writing anything about how great I am. It was like, it's what we like.
I think those people that understand that, is it fair to say that that is what is fueling the fear around AI? So this using AI and almost becoming robotic or bland versus what you've just talked about there, understanding how to actually use AI without compromising your voice to be a tool to support. What mistakes are you seeing that you are hoping this book will help people avoid moving forward?
Yeah, and I think your question is, like, some people go to extremes where they go, I'm not using AI at all because it's cheating and it's going to make me dumb and it's not going to make me creative. That would be like going, I'm not using a calculator. And then the other end, like, people are putting everything into ChatGPT and just almost copy and pasting it, and you can see it's like, so what I always look for in ChatGPT generated content is there's a lot of cliches. There's like a lot of metaphors, and it's like things like going from courage to credibility to blah to blah. And I was like, and the bloody M dashes. Have you ever seen any more M dashes in your life? It's pretty hard to do an M dash. And it was like, so first of all, when I use ChatGPT for anything, I always use Australian spelling or UK English spelling. Because if you say Australian spelling, then they bring in all the Australian bloody ocarisms. And it was like, no, I don't want to sound like a bogan. I just want it to be UK English spelling. And then I also go, don't use M dashes. So I think it's like anything, it's finding the happy medium. And that's what I talk about, using AI as your creative partner. Now, you don't have to use AI to storytelling. In fact, because Janine, you and I use the same editor with Callie, amazing editor. The book was called Story Intelligence, which I loved. And I did actually use AI to help me come up with the title, except they called it narrative intelligence, and I'm just not a fan of the word narrative. It gets so freaking overused. But as soon as it said intelligence, I went, oh, it reminded me like of emotional intelligence. And so I came up with story intelligence. And so I was looking for a definition. And of course, there's no definition of what story intelligent means. So I had to come up with one. And I was in conversations with Callie the whole time where it was, are we including the use of AI in the definition? And I sort of said, yeah. Then I went, no. And in the end, it was a really deep, thoughtful conversation to say, no, you can have really high story intelligence. So you can be really good at this and never use AI. So because, I consider I've got high story intelligence. I wasn't using AI 2 years ago. So I don't think story intelligence necessarily you have to use AI, but it's like you can use it if you want to.
Yeah. You said two things earlier. It's how to find stories, and we've touched on that a little bit, and then how to refine. What are the key tips for helping people find their stories using whatever AI tool they're using?
Yeah, or not using AI. So it's interesting. I've had there's one chapter in the book is how to find your stories without AI, just like, let's go retro. And then there's one chapter on how to use AI to help find your story. So, and in the book, I've just got like a whole heap of questions that you could answer that will help you find stories around values. And I talk of things about like, if you're trying to find a story around teamwork but can't find one, things like looking through the camera roll on your phone, like looking through your old photo albums if you want to go really retro. And there's an activity like a timeline. I think of your earliest memory, some of the stuff I talk about in my workshops, I go through that. So all the stuff that you can use to help you find your stories. And then, of course, you can get into the AI, and using AI to help you find your stories is asking it questions. So either if you're trying to find those public or parable stories, can you give me some well-known stories around teamwork? And it's going to give them to you. You always got to check for accuracy. AI hallucinates, as we know, which we all do, in fairness, at times. I'm quite delusional myself. But then so you can find those public ones, but then you can also, if you're trying to go, no, I'm actually truly trying to find one of my own, it's again, ask me questions. The prompt in ChatGPT we know is important. I would be saying, pretend you're my storytelling coach. Ask me questions to help me uncover stories around teamwork or courage or whatever it is you want to find stories on.
Yeah, and this takes time. I think that's the other myth that I know I talk to many of my clients about is this isn't a sit down and 5 minutes later, you've got your thing and you can go. Like training the tool and working with the tool as your storytelling assistant is the key, like you would a person in real life. So that's the key. You got to invest the time, right?
Yeah. And I came back to my earlier comment. Storytelling's like, it's not easy. Like, again, do you want your communication to be easy or do you want it to be effective? And so if you want it to be easy, don't worry about storytelling and just do whatever you're doing. But if you want it to be effective, put the time and effort into finding the right story and then, of course, practicing it. So when you're saying it, you're never reading your story and, making sure you're not losing your voice along the way. And I think part of not losing your voice is practice it out loud. And if there's any bit that goes, well, that does not sound like me, then don't say it.
And that's the refined piece that you're talking about. Yeah, to overlay your own voice. Because I know this is something that I've been hearing around the tracks around, and actually yesterday I was running a session and this came up yesterday that generative AI is cheating. And you bust that myth a little bit in this book. Can you tell me more about your thoughts on that concept that if we were to use generative AI, it's actually teaching? Maybe it's not.
Yeah, like I literally address is using AI cheating. And it comes back because people still think that. And it was like, again, used wisely, it's not cheating. Used as your creative partner. And I talk about, even in the process of writing the book, I used AI I used AI to help find the title that I just spoke about. I tried to get AI to find the subtitle, but in the end, I wasn't happy with any. And our old mate Kieran was the person that came up with the subtitle. It's using it, again, we're coming back to us using it as your creative partner. I sort of talk about the metaphor of Batman and Robin, that you're Batman, you're still in control. But Robin's he's very eager. He's a very eager sidekick and he wants to help. And often we talk about AI, sometimes it's like the very eager grad or the intern, and they're very eager to help, but you just got to check for accuracy and also not give them control. I don't think it's cheating. I think if you're using AI and then cutting and pasting and just putting it out as your own, I just think that's dumb. Like, that's dumb. We're adding to the blandness and then we're not cutting through. So I don't think that's cheating. I think I call that story stupidity, not story intelligence. But we don't want to avoid it. Like, you can't be sitting there going, and I know there's all these ethical concerns about AI, as there should be, and some people in organizations need to be leading those conversations about the ethics of AI. But it's like any technology. If you just go, no, I'm not going to use it, there's too many benefits to not use it.
I love it. So this book, Story Intelligence, fundamentally, who have you written it for and what's it going to help them with?
Yeah. So again, probably back to your question around the evolution of storytelling, like there's chapters for anyone who's ever read Stories for Work that I wrote, about 8 years ago. There's a whole examples of stories, and I've included that in this book as well. So there's things there is stories for presentations. So if you're doing a presentation, like there's a whole heap of examples in that. There's stories for sales again. So if you're trying to sell, how you use stories. But I've included things like, stories for social media, like on podcast, we spoke about stories all the time on our podcast, on social media, like whether you're posting on LinkedIn or whatever, how to use them. There's stories for, values, I think, to communicate values. So anyone that needs to communicate their values. And again, it could be a parent. It could be a teacher. Influencers often trying to communicate their values, leaders, but also stories for speeches. And like I said, my dad's eulogy is in this because I wanted to show that if you want to talk about someone, just have mini stories, wedding speeches, so all that. So it's sort of the book for, I don't want to go super broad, but it is for anyone that needs to communicate and influence more effectively. So you are going from anyone from a parent to a CEO to an entrepreneur to a salesperson. So, and I go into depth about all those 4 types of stories: the public, the parable, the professional, the personal, and give examples of that.
And how we actually need all 4 of those stories potentially.
Yeah, you need all 4. I remember a parable, and I was walking with my daughter Alex we were walking along a beach, and I think because we were walking along the beach, I thought of it, and she was just questioning her purpose in life. It was a very deep conversation, and she just sort of went, I think the eagerness of youth, where she sort of thought, I thought when I started I'd be making such a big difference, and I go, you're just out, but you can still make a difference. And because she knows I do storytelling, I thought if I launched into a whole story, she'd go, Mum, you're not at work now. But I said, can I share a story with you? And she went, yes, all right. And I shared a parable, and I said, so there was a man walking along the beach, and there was thousands of starfish just stranded everywhere. And so he was walking along the beach just tossing starfishes back into the ocean because they were going to die under the burning sun. And there was a fisherman that saw him do this, and the fisherman just said, what are you doing? You are wasting your time. You cannot, make a difference. There was thousands of starfish. And he picked up one starfish and threw it back into the ocean, said, I made a difference to that starfish. And I just said to Alex, so you just need to find your starfish every day. And it could be as simple as doing the coffee order for your team. She went, yeah, good story, Mum. It's just like, fair point. And, that's a parable. It's a well-known parable. Probably heard it, 25 years ago. And so that went in the book. And I thought, and it's not only the parable, the story about telling Alex the story and the impact it can have.
It's so powerful. And I think I want to circle back to what compelled you to write this book, because in this world that we are all currently living, leading in, navigating, there is no doubt that there is a hell of a lot of noise out there, and every single person is searching for truth. And my view is that in that world, the equivalent of the starfish and supporting that one starfish is we have to find ways to stand out, and we have to work even harder to build conviction around our truth, what we believe, the work that we do, how we can help. And so to me, this is where the reporting style of communication, the 7 easy steps to create a best-selling book, the How I Made a Million Overnight, is not building that cut through or building that trust in you. And to your point that you made right at the beginning and the compelling nature of this, fundamentally, your mission, your passion is around getting more and more people to be brave and courageous enough to share their truths, their stories in a way that is the equivalent of throwing that starfish back in the ocean, creating through their own learning an opportunity for someone else to take that and run with it. And I think that's what the world needs right now. It's the storytelling, the truthfulness, the authenticity in it that is real. And in a world where there is a lack of trust and there is so much deep fake and is this truth or not, you cannot fake your own stories. I mean, some people can, but you can see it, right?
Yeah, you can see it. And then, and that's genuinely what this is about, giving the people the courage and the capability to share those stories. And because, I mean, the research shows that when you share a story, especially your own stories, your own unique stories, the research shows that the audience not only connects with the story, but they connect with you. And I think it's when you look, Janine, the rise of influencers. And so why are there so many influencers that have millions of followers? It's because they're sharing the real them. Like, and yes, there's some fake ones around, but they're you. And people don't want the perfect, polished whatever. They don't want the brand. They want the people, and those authentic stories will get cut through where the polished, perfect, bloody promos won't. So yeah, whether you are an individual like you and I running our own company, or whether you're a CEO of a small business or a large business, they still want to know you. They still want to deal with people. So and stories can help you do that.
Yeah. I love it. You mentioned offline, because I'd love to finish with this, because I haven't even heard this. You said you wrote a letter to AI. Can you share that with us?
Yeah, so I don't know, for those of you who have ever read Elizabeth Gilbert's Big Magic, she talks about fear and creativity, and she wrote a letter to fear. So whenever she goes on a creating endeavor, she literally wrote this letter to fear. So I was sort of inspired by that. So I wrote a letter to AI. So this is, and I think this ties into its creative partner, right? So I'm putting on my bloody specs to read this. So it goes here. Dearest AI, creativity and I are about to go on a road trip together. I invite you to join us. I will be doing my job on this road trip, which is to work hard and stay focused, and creativity will be doing its job, which is to remain stimulating and inspiring. There is plenty of room in this vehicle for all of us, so make yourself at home, but understand this. Creativity and I are the only ones who will be making any decisions along the way. I recognise and respect the supporting and valuable role you can play, so I will at times ask you for advice and suggestions along the way. But understand that I will always make the final decision and I will always be in control. Don't take this personally, as I know you won't, because you're not a person. But I know sometimes while you are eager, you hallucinate. So sometimes you are wrong. You also come with some built-in biases, so we are not always aligned. So you're allowed to have a seat. You're allowed to have a voice when asked. But my dear friend AI, you are absolutely forbidden to drive. I will always be in control. And I think if that's how you treat AI, then you'll avoid that blandness of AI-generated content and putting shit out there.
As you said, this book, the compulsion that you had to write it is because the reality is we are living in a world that is speeding up very, very quickly with technology, and we have to keep the humanity with it. And hence that story intelligence, the craft of authentic storytelling made smarter with AI, I think is the perfect title for the book. This book is now available at all major booksellers online. I'm sure we can find it on your website. If you Google Gabrielle Dolan, I will put the link in the chat. Any final words for our listeners as we wrap up today?
Maybe I keep reading from the book. I haven't memorized this shit, right? The story intelligence, the definition I ended up coming up with. So it's the ability to purposefully and skillfully use authentic storytelling to communicate with clarity and to connect, engage, and inspire. And if that's what you're trying to do, then use a story.
Excellent. The timing couldn't be even more perfect for this book. Love every word in it. I'll be sharing it far and wide. Thank you, Gabrielle. It's been fabulous having you here, as always. And I know this won't be the last time we chat. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Janine.
See ya.